Are you listening?
This is the Rob Scott Show.
Damn.
I mean, really, like, if we're not trying to change the world, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Rob Scott Show. I'm here with Rob Scott. We want to say hi. Welcome.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited for this talk.
Me too. Let's do it.
Okay, great. For our listeners, we're doing a little bit of different format. You might be hearing from me a lot on this episode because I'm leading it. So hopefully it's as good.
Yeah.
But kind of the goal today with this episode is I want to speak with Rob and kind of help you guys figure out a way to really create change in your life. And I think, as most things that we talk about, there's many dimensions. But where I really want to focus is, I know a lot of people listening and a lot of people that we work with often feel stuck and feel an overwhelm. And this to me is a really easy, simple tip to kind of help you create real change. And it's the idea of being your word. And I think there's many different ways to talk about this. And I think while we'll talk about being our word to ourselves, what I really want to discuss today on this episode is how that works in a more external capacity. So I want our listeners.
Let me cut in on this. So, like, being our word, right? I don't know that that's the sexiest idea necessarily. Unless we kind of break down why that matters, right? I mean, it might be more interesting to the general public if we were to tell people, like, here's how to get away with lying, right? Like, that's what marketers are studying. And, like, different people are trying to figure out how can we manipulate. And our highest earning professions, this is not exactly true, but, like, who do we most follow and pay attention to, or who are really powerful people in our culture? Politicians and actors, right? Politicians are known for not telling the truth, and actors, we're literally thrilled to watch them create a fantasy and not do it. So this idea of being our word, like, why is that valuable? And I want to really quickly, because this is a big thing that we focus on, really quickly, if you can't be your word to yourself, what happens, right? We devolve very quickly if we're setting what we should do and thinking about what we should do all the time, and then we're never able to be that. We devolve very quickly in our own self-worth, right? And then what do others think of us if we're not our word? And we get caught, right? Like, which is obvious. We're going to get caught if we start, we're not, we shouldn't be lying. We shouldn't be doing these things. But if we're genuinely not even lying, but we're setting up promises, or we're saying we'll do certain things and then we don't do them, very quickly the world looks at us like, you're worthless, right? Like, I can't trust you. You're not, right? So that ability to trust somebody who can be their word makes us more valuable in society, and it certainly makes us more valuable to ourselves. So this is really important that we can kind of get this down.
Definitely. And I think it's this starting point, or a great launching point, for when people come and say, hey, I want to impact change. I want to be someone in my family or in my business, and I want to show up as a leader. Kind of the dream of someone who can show up for themselves, yes. And once you start showing up for yourselves, there's also an aspect of showing up for other people, right? So people will rely on you, they'll trust you, they'll view you as leaders. And then recently, we had someone share in a testimonial about working with us, is that they found that doing the work with us and showing up for themselves in that way that you just talked about, they noticed that other people started coming to them for advice. And I think he said, it has been so long since someone asked me advice on something. And I think part of the aspect of what he was working through is he wasn't showing up for himself. So once he kind of checked that box, he saw how other people could show up for you. But I kind of want to look at it with you today. I want our listeners to feel empowered, to feel confident, and to be really people who show up for other people in whatever way. But I would love your thoughts on it. That to me feels like the first step for creating real change, or one of the beginning steps for creating change on an external level, right? Changing yourself, yes, but creating change in the world, in the business.
Yeah, I mean, nothing works if you can't be your word, right? And so there's the aspect of being your word, which is like, are you honest? And it's not just honesty that we're talking about here. We're talking about setting realistic goals that map to even what's possible, right? I'll try not to name names, but there are, like, personal development programs out there that invite people to be really huge in what they want. And I mean, I can think of 3 or 4 of them, right? Big movements, lots of books about them, but really established coaching programs as well that really, I mean, and in our work, we invite people to dream big, right? But there's a difference between your dream and what is realistic, right? There are limits to what happens here. And so being our word is certainly about being honest. That's an aspect of it, but it's also about like, can you be accurate, right? Do you have a sense of what's really possible? Do you have a sense of what you really can do with your attention and your time and your means and your money and the people that you influence and all that stuff? Like if I go to a business and they make promises to me about a certain date, and then they don't meet that date. I mean, I'm literally in temp housing right now, right? Because this new construction that I'm moving into didn't meet the date. They didn't do what they said they were going to do. And in lots of other ways, they are doing what they said they're going to do. So I'm not super upset with them yet, but this is a big disruption to my life. Like I'm not in an office. I'm standing on this is like a kitchen counter that I'm kind of doing this podcast from because I don't have my office set up yet. I don't have these things. And that's because very competent builders, but they missed a date. They weren't their word. They didn't do what they said they were going to do. So, I mean, and it's the same thing I think that translates through business and even say you're trying to meet a new parenting goal. You're trying to spend more time with your kids or something like that. You can tell them till you're blue in the face, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But like, how do you make that leap from that internal, like, I'm going to be my word, I'm going to know my values, to really creating change, right? Transforming that relationship, getting you in your new spot, meeting a work deadline. Like, how do you get the action, the doing, the external part to kind of come true there? Because you also let me talk about the attractiveness of overpromising. Right. Yes. And this almost maps to like when you set up like goal setting, one of the most important things is like, don't talk about your goals, deliver your goals, right? Because there's a big payoff when we tell someone what our goal is. Like, here's what I'm planning to do. There's a hit of like, wow, that's brilliant, or that'll be so exciting. And we all for a moment get to live into this future that doesn't exist yet. And there's like peptide addiction. Like we get a hit of, look at what I'm promising to be, and people love it. And then the actual doing of it is more difficult than that. The actual doing of it takes dedication and time and effort and attention and all these different things. And so many people get addicted to talking about what they're going to do instead of what they've done or what they're in the process of doing. And that's really, really attractive because we get a bit of a payoff in the attention from it. And so what led me to that was parenting, right? Not just telling our friends what our big business goals are, who we want to be in the future or whatever. But when we make a promise to a child, right? If a child is upset in the moment, we'll say, well, I'll take you to Disney for your birthday or whatever. And we didn't really think through what Disney costs. Can I do it? Can I afford it? Can we really do it? And then birthday comes around and it's actually, Timmy, we can't go to Disney this year. And now our respect with our child is down, all these things. And if we're consistently doing that, right? I've been around people that moment to moment are not being their word, both in the positive and the negative about what they're telling their kids, right? Saying some consequence that they don't have the follow through to really live into and make real. So they're not their word on the negative thing, the threat that they tell the child, if you will. And then they let it down in the promises. And so all of these things are ways that we're not our word often. And there's a payoff in the immediate is to make this big promise or to do this harder threat that I don't actually want to inflict. Well, if you're not going to actually inflict it, you probably shouldn't say it, right? If you're not really planning on doing Disney with the kid, you shouldn't promise that, right? Because it leads to other issues. And again, we don't respect ourselves when we're not our word to ourselves, and other people around us, including our children, our coworkers, our friends, our family, don't respect us when we're just kind of full of shit, right? When we're not really doing what we say we're going to do, right? So, well,
and I love what you said about the accuracy, right? Because there's a different way that I feel like that conversation could have gone. Kids upset, and you say, hey, I'm going to take you to ice cream. We're going to go see the new Disney movie that's coming out, right? Yep. That is something you can accurately deliver on, and it creates change, right? Doing that and then following through and being your word, that creates change in your relationship, that builds more trust. You feel like you're fulfilling your side, whoever, whether it's a child or a coworker or a spouse or a friend, that other person looks at you, right? The external part, as someone who is their word and can trust you. And the next time you say something, there might be a different reaction. So it's really like the accuracy part right, is really where I think we miss, right?
Well,
Because
that's where we become people that become more powerful in the world, right? If you're somebody who is kind of fibbing about what you're going to do or what you can do, a lot of your energy is in that miss of what the promises were. A lot of your energy and attention is in the management of those relationships that you've now let down in some way or whatever else is going on. Meanwhile, in another universe is a version of you who really took the time to think about what could be done, actually showed up to do it, is actually delivering on the promises, is really who you said you'd be, and you are that person. So you become respected, trusted. You become more capable of somebody who's actually doing and getting things done and creating change in yourself and in the world. Now you're somebody who's, when your edge is you're already successful at putting on that local play at your high school, now you have the chops to maybe put on a local play in your professional community. Then you become the person who can actually be off Broadway. Then you become the person who can actually run a play on Broadway, and you're really the person doing it, rather than the person who's skipping all that reality to like, I'm going to be on Broadway one day, and there's no actual steps to really doing and matching being your word in what you did. It's way more powerful to have mastery over what's real, what you can do, and often I will hold myself back in certain ways so that I remain my word with somebody, right? Even if things have changed or things have happened and people will say, hey, well, that person let you down. Why would you still do what you said in this sense? And it's like, because it's important for me to be my word, right? It's important for me to do that across my life. It's a value that I hold really, really high. And that way, when I tell somebody I'm going to do something, they can really trust it universally, right? And one of the things, I think we should get into like the how a little bit here. One of the things here is having a really strong no muscle, and also having a pause before you make promises to your kid in the heat of the moment, in your business, what you can do personally if you're going to move or whatever. Like having a sense of your calendar, having a sense of really knowing what your time and attention is going to be like.
Time management is huge.
Yeah. And defaulting to saying no to more things so that the things that you say yes to can really actually happen, right? If we're pleasing everybody by going, oh, of course, Marcy, I can do that. And yes, so-and-so. And yes, my child, I'll do that. And yes, over here, I'll do this. All of a sudden we realize that in reality, we can't be all those people, do all those things. That's not realistic. So again, this maps, as it almost always does, back to like, what do we value? What really matters? Time and attention is limited. So really thinking through, and then having the follow through, the willpower, the character to really show up and do the hard work that it takes to be your word, right? Whatever that is. And there's little examples of this. It's, I will go to the movies with you on Friday, even if it turns out later I don't really want to. Well, I said I'd go, so I'm going to be my word, right? To the heart.
I'll do my dishes. Yeah. I'll get to the dishes, or hey, I'll run by the grocery store, or the little things in your life that maybe you don't. You're like, that's not a big value. That's not going to tip the scale, and maybe it won't. But it's exercising the ability to be your word, and maybe from an external point, right? Because often we look, yes, if we're our word to ourselves, it'll be easier to be our word for other people. Yeah. But I wonder if our listeners would like to hear more about the external aspect of it, which to me is accountability, right? Yeah. How does speaking into something to somebody, or writing it in a journal, or putting on a sticky note, hey, I'm going to work out 3 times a week. How does the accountability aspect play into being our word, keeping our word, showing up for ourselves and others? Well,
when you say how does it play into, what do you mean? I mean, it's almost the whole game. So what are you really asking there?
I guess, what's the value in accountability?
All right. So accountability is a huge topic all by itself, because so many people are looking for accountability. Like just today I saw online, somebody's looking for just an accountability coach, right? Doesn't want a coach who's going to do big breakthroughs and all that, just somebody to hold them accountable. There's a really interesting social dynamic in accountability. So if nobody's looking, I may not do my dishes, right? But if my parents are coming over to see, you'll find somebody like whipping through the house, like cleaning up, because other people are going to see what you're doing. And so this is again sort of like, who do we want to show the world we are versus who are we really when nobody's looking, right? There's in many of us, there's often a difference. And I think the healthier we are, there's less of a difference there. We start to actually really just be who we are. Kind of people can see truly who we are because we really like who we are. We're not living a messy life, or, we're doing whatever. That's probably ideal. But
that's a good tip too. I think a good measurement is how close are you? Yes. How close does that match up? And does it map to your behaviors when someone's looking and when someone's not looking, because that's going to tell you a lot.
When I was my least healthy, I was a very different person if I was talking to my mother than someone at my job, than my best friend, than when I was alone, right? There were literally different versions of me, and I was not my word kind of across all of those, right? I was being a fiction and all these different things. And as I healed and grew and got healthier and all that, it was like all those sort of fake identities kind of merged into like a more real sense of self and self-worth and self-confidence and happiness of who I am. So there's being accountable. It has more social pressure, right? There's a natural social pressure. If we claim something out loud, the group can often hold us accountable because there's shame if we're not our word in front of other people, right? But if no one's looking, I only have to deal with that internally. Now, there is a cost to that when I'm alone also, but the cost gets louder when other people are going to like wag a finger or ultimately shame us or do whatever. What you'll find is the people that really aren't their word are doing this whole thing and coming up with excuses why it really didn't happen. And they're living in that kind of promise world of like, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to be. Oh, I promise I'll make it right later. Often addicts turn into that, right? They're making all these promises and they just want to feel better in the moment. And so they don't actually do the follow through and do it. But if we're trying to track and get better, creating accountability systems for ourselves is very, very powerful. Having an accountability buddy, having a coach, having somebody who's checking in with us to say what really matters here, because there's more and more choice and opportunity all the time. Just with like what we can look at online, what we can spend our time on, there's more and more abundant opportunities to pull our attention away. So getting with
more voices, so it's harder to find your values sometimes.
Way more voices.
Know what they are.
Yeah, way more voices, right? So, getting with somebody to check in, what really matters to me? What should I be paying attention to? What are the game changers here? And getting clear on that is great. And then holding yourself to those over time with somebody else, right? Being held accountable by somebody else is really, really powerful. But ultimately, even if you hire a coach, it's going to fall back on you, right? One of the things I can create impactful ways to keep people accountable. There's really creative ways of doing that when you work with somebody. But ultimately, I still work for them, right? They're paying me to be there. So if they want to blow it off, ultimately you still have to have the internal muscle of really showing up to do what you said you were going to do. And what I want people to get is that feels so good when you actually do that. If you set a goal or you do something and you actually are your word in how you show up, it feels amazing, right? There's a dynamic, and maybe we save it for another talk. I'm not sure. I'll let you do this, but the difference between goals and intentions, right? And like,
I was going to say we could have a whole nother talk on goals and intentions. Yeah, it's
cool. Well, we'll save that, but more coming on that for sure. But so, I mean, does that speak into accountability a little bit for you?
It definitely does. Because I don't want to discount. I think often we kind of say, here's how your problems manifest internally, and here's how that kind of filters out into the rest of the world. But I do think there's value sometimes in exactly what you just last said, is when you do something, and let's say you're doing it in front of someone else for this example, when you say, hey, I'm going to take you to ice cream in the movie to your kid, or hey, I'm going to deliver this big proposal at work, or hey, we're going to have a regular date night this week to a spouse or something. When you do that and that good feeling, right, that's another mirror for you. It kind of reflects back. So if you're struggling with it internally, like practice it on something easy externally. Get home early, do the dishes that you said, take out the trash, see what that feels like, see what other people react to you when you do that, when you deliver in that way. And find, I mean, there's multiple ways we can find that feeling. But it is such a big payoff when you are your word, and it's such a detriment when you are not your word.
And let's for 1 second, let's go into the why of that again, right? It's literally dangerous to us if other people aren't their word, right? If you're going to go out on a big, back in cave, people days, right? You go out on some big mammoth hunt and you're expecting, Joe to show up with his spear over there to do whatever, and you get into some dangerous situation and Joe just doesn't show up. You literally, like, it could be life and death, right? So if we're depending, like the whole thing that humans do better than any other species is cooperate, right? We all cooperate up to literally global cooperation at this point. But, it started at hundreds of people could cooperate, and then thousands, and then tens of thousands and millions. And now literally there's global networks of our economy and our money and agreements, right, where we're cooperating together. If institutions aren't their word in that, if people aren't their word around money with you, right? We get into criminal activities, all that. Systems start to break down, right? It's dangerous.
Insurance, law enforcement.
Yeah, all of that. It's dangerous when people aren't their word, right? If you do business with somebody and you expect safe food to be delivered to you, but they didn't take care of the food and they weren't their word with what this is and they sold you bad food, you get sick, right? So we hate this societally, right? It's really, really dangerous. And that's why we end up shaming people when we find that people were liars or they did something behind the scenes and they weren't their word, or they were powerful and they misused that power or whatever. Like, we hate that because it makes us foundationally unsafe, right? It's not okay to have somebody not be their word to you. And yet, for our side going out, sometimes there's shortcuts where lies can help us, right? Sometimes if you don't get caught, or you could do whatever, or you could take a little extra, right? There's all kinds of psychological studies on, like, why do we lie? Why do we manipulate? Sometimes lying about who we are gets us a more attractive partner. Sometimes lying about who we are can get us a better job, right? There are advantages to managing perception, and kids learn this on their own. They don't have to be taught to lie because the model of other, right? Another thing that humans do, maybe better than any other species, is we can model what other people are maybe thinking, right? And so when your partner comes out and says, do I look fat in this? If we were just honest in our word absolutely all the time, we lose politeness, right? There's a level of, like, maybe the honest thing to say there is, I've seen you look better, or that's not your best, or there's a way. But, what a lot of us realize is that sometimes there's shortcuts where not being totally honest or whatever is an advantage in the moment. But it's not an advantage long term. It's not an advantage to cooperation. It's really not an advantage if we end up lying to ourselves about what we will do and what's going on with that, right? That just deeply erodes self-trust and self-love. If we just go, man, I can't make a promise and keep it, even to myself, right? That leads us to feeling really, really badly about who we are. And socially, we end up being kind of the scourge of the earth. Like, we don't want to be dealt with because you never show up and you're never your word. You don't pay what you say you're going to pay. You don't do what you say you're going to do, etc. Right? So this is why this matters a ton to us, right? And so then we get into, like, how can you be more your word? Like, what are maybe some of the quick tips there? I mean, one thing is knowing what you want to be your word about, right? So if you're a parent,
aspect, definitely.
Yeah, like, what matters, right? We keep coming back to
and
this.
Values are stacked, right?
Yeah.
You can have a ton of values, and it's navigating, hey, this is my most important, this is a core value, this is who I am. This is something that I do hold as important, but can be moved around.
Yeah.
It's kind of feeling into that whole list of, like, who am I, and how do I want to represent myself to other people and myself? Yeah,
totally. And that's not as hard as it sounds, and it doesn't have to be as complete as that sounds. Like, that somebody might hear that and go, well, I got a lot of work to think about everything I value, like, with this empty sheet of paper, like, well, I value honor and integrity and, like, whatever. Like, and then it's like, well, what do I do with this? But let's think about, like, if you're a parent who owns your own business and you're trying to do that, right? Like, there's some things about your business. There's some goals about your business that you want to think about. Like, what really will we do this next quarter? Like, what can we say yes to? What's the 1, 2, maybe 3 things that we're definitely going to do? And the rest of it are maybes or no's, right? It's like, I don't know if that's going to happen. That's definitely not happening now.
Right.
This quarter, we're going to get our taxes together. We're going to do this one big marketing push, and we're going to do this in customer service or whatever, right? So that we get clear. And then it becomes, over time, whether you're holding yourself accountable, whether you're getting coworkers to keep you accountable, whether you've hired a coach or something else, how can you set up check-ins to see if that's truly happening over time? And things are going to adjust. Life happens. We're not the best at planning. Usually things take about twice as long as we think they're going to, right? Because it's true.
It's
like,
true. Yeah, no, it's true.
If you're a good project manager, really get honest about what you think it's going to take and double it, right? Double the time, or double the resources, or double, the money you're going to need to do it. It's generally, we usually miss by about, we're off by a factor of 1/2 or 2, depending on how you think about that. So,
well, that's the second part of it, right? Is what you said about accuracy, right? Is being accurate in what you're saying and how and what you're promising verbally.
Yeah.
Make it so it's something that you can deliver, that you can deliver on.
For sure. And here's another thing, and this is a little bit between the goals and intentions thing, and we'll talk more about that another time for real. But what you want to kind of judge yourself on is what is your effort and your intention, right? Because you don't control everything, you will be late sometimes. Like things do come up, right? But get honest with yourself about, was I late because I was late, or was I late because there really was an accident on the road, right? And I'm never going to tell you there's healthy shame, right? I'm never going to tell you to shame yourself. There's definitely healthy shame about certain things where we're learning from, what did I do wrong here? What happened? And that bad feeling does kind of lead us to curb better behavior in the future. It very quickly can become toxic. So often I'm trying to talk about shame, right?
Right.
But there is a healthy version of that where we can be really honest with ourselves about, like, where did I drop the ball there? Like what happened there? But what I want people to kind of dial in on is, like, are you giving it your best effort? Are you really showing up to do it? And then the results may not match it, right? So there's things there that you fully control, and there's things that you don't control. And sometimes the things that you don't control are not going to go your way, and that's okay. But, like, are you showing up for what you can control, like you said you would, and as fully as you can toward what your word was, right?
Well, and if you're someone that presents as someone who is their word, then whatever situation or people around you, when something happens, you're late or an accident or whatever, you just get overwhelmed and you have to bail on something that you wouldn't normally, they get it because they see you as someone that is generally your word, right? Totally. So you don't have to backpedal. You don't have to make excuses. They just know. They're like, I get it. Something came
Obviously, something came up, right? Because I know that you would be here otherwise, right? Totally. So let's go back to kind of the steps of how. So one is kind of knowing what you value and what matters, not making that list too long. I was giving that example of being a parent who owns your own business, having quarterly goals that are really clear, things that you can control. If parenting, if you're a parent, let's say, really being your word in your parenting more consistently might be another thing that you really value. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to show how values don't have to be so crazy and ethereal. They can be really tangible to, I value these 3 goals this quarter in my business. I value being my word to my partner and my kid. I value, and honestly, maybe even less than that, I don't value being my word maybe even to my friends as much as that, right? Like if something needs to default here, I'm going to break a promise to a friend over a promise to my kid, maybe. Now, I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying that really coming up with like these 3 to 5 areas are kind of like, I don't want to break my promises at all. And then beyond that, it gets more into that gray maybe space. And, with your friends, if it's a maybe, try to know that, try to be accurate with what you can do. And if you do make a promise, it needs to happen. But I think once we do have kids and we're older adults and we run businesses and all that, friends know that a promise to meet them for a movie on the weekend or something might get superseded by a kid issue or something that you value, right? That's a higher value than maybe not the friendship as a whole, but that movie night with a friend or something.
Sure. Yeah.
So is that clear? So I think that people kind of going through, wow, I really want to be my word to my partner. I really want to be my word to my kids. I really want to be my word in my business and what I'm saying to the world and what I'm promising, and that we can really deliver on that. That's enough to sort of go, okay, how can I show up and do this? What would that look like? And then give yourself the credit as you're doing this, as you do, and maybe for yourself too. I want to be my word with myself, right? About the things that I set up for myself.
Yeah. I think a mindset tip there is just kind of what you say to yourself is, I am my word, right? Mm-hmm. So whether that is a reassurance or a guideline, that is a really good kind of thought to cycle in your head. Useful thought to cycle in your head is, totally. I am my word.
I am my word. Yeah, of course. I am my word. I'm going to be my word. I love that. And then, so, maybe for yourself internally, you're going to set up some goals of, I want to eat better. I want to work out. I want to whatever. You can't do too many, right? We're not going to be perfect if we're trying to do 1,000 things. So just, 1 or 2 or 3 things at a time. What's important to you? How can you show up and do those? And be your word. And if it's too much, give yourself a break to be like, you know what? It's not the time to get my workout plan in place. I don't have the time and the space for that. This isn't the month for yoga right now, right? This month is for parenting and my business or whatever. It's way easier to lower the bar about what you're saying you'll do rather than making all these commitments, right? That's a huge mindset shift right there. Mm-hmm. Is
I mean, it's Disney versus a movie, right?
Yeah, stop committing to so much, right? Just lower the bar of what your promises are. Nobody's going to notice or care. What they're going to notice is what you do promise you are showing up for, right? So just turn down the dial on how grand the promises are. And often when we don't feel good about ourselves, that's when we're promising bigger things because we're getting the promises, not in who we really are. But if you become a person who is your word and can do more and can deliver more things in reality, you don't have to promise as much because you just are your word. And as you're walking through, what you really are up to and what you're doing is impressive. You're happy with it. The world is happy with it. And so you feel satisfied. So you don't need to do these big, grandiose, BS promises about what's possible or what you're going to do. It's legitimate. And you're actually somebody who's probably under promising and over delivering, right? That would be a super sweet spot of where you go, well, I don't know. And then you have the capability to do even more than you promised, right?
Right.
That's a totally different thing than somebody who's like, I'm going to do all this. And then they don't do anything close to that, right? So I think it's which kind of person do you want to be, right? Do you want to be somebody who can set realistic goals, actually have the time and attention to be able to do what you say, be somebody in the world who's creating internal change in yourself and external change around you? Or do you want to be the kind of person who's, not at all in reality, in their own promises to themselves? They're overwhelmed. They're saying, I should do this, I should do that, I should do that. And then they're feeling horrible because they're not doing any of it. They're making big promises to other people and they're not living into them. They're lying to their kids about what will happen and what will go on. I mean, that's a disaster in every direction, right? And so I think one of the things I really want people to take away is being your word matters, right? This is something that if we could all be a little bit better at this, the world would be a better place, right? Everything gets better as we start to be more realistic about what we're promising. And then when we can actually deliver on what we've promised, it's a game changer completely.
Oh, it super matters. And I love that. And I also kind of want to emphasize where I think we began, which is it's not an ending, it's a beginning, right? This is the first step. If people are like, hey, I want to change. I want change in the world. I want change in my life. I want change in who I am. This is the beginning. And and not only do you get that, hey, this feels really good when I show up, but I would also give a tip of like, try it. Try something where you might have been struggling with being your word, or you're just setting the wrong expectations. You're not quite accurate with what you can deliver. Promise stuff that you can deliver and see how people show up around you. Yeah. Because what you're doing is you're setting the bar maybe at a different level for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're saying, I can't do the stars and the moon, but I can do this right now for you.
Yes.
What you're also doing is you're raising the bar, right? It might feel like you're lowering the bar for yourself, but you're raising the bar for other people. Mm-hmm. Because other people around you are going to be attracted to the person who is what they said, who is who they say they are, who does what they say they're going to do. And they're going to react to you in that way. And they're going to step up. Hopefully they're going to step up their game, right? That is kind of, to me, a great place to really make change in small and big ways. But like, you got to start there. It is so, so important.
Yeah, it's super huge. So everything that we've already said, I hope is valuable. One thing that I want to kind of point out is that what can be at the core of much of this is having really misaligned thought patterns, right? Having thought patterns like, I'm not enough, I'll never be able to do that, nobody likes me, I'm not attractive, whatever those things are. If you are suffering from, limiting beliefs, things where you can kind of, when you're at night going to bed and you're really just with your own thoughts and you kind of hear those negative things, or when you set a big goal for yourself, the first thing that pops up is, that'll never happen for me. I'll never be successful like that person. Or if you're doing that compare and despair all the time, then it really is time to get in and do some deeper mindset work. One of the next steps that we have for people is the Recode Your Mind product at recodeyourmind.com. Go in, check it out. It's an amazing program. It really does change the game. And I think that limited mindset and those kinds of things are one of the greatest reasons that we get held back and end up not being our word, both to ourselves and to other people. So hopefully that's a good next step for people that want to take it. Hopefully this was valuable all on its own. Please.
You can also kind of check us out. We have we talked a little bit this episode about accountability, right? So we have another group coaching program that is an accountability, basically a large accountability group with other people and a coach. So you can check us out there. if you want
the
more,
Identity Shifting Mastermind.
yeah.
Yeah,
If you
you
want
got
more
to name it.
information
You
on
can't
that.
check it out if you don't name it, right? So yeah, that's at identityshifting.com. You can learn more about that. And that is a way to work with me directly in a really small group. And we run those groups pretty frequently. So go check that out. That is an amazing next step as well. So Sarah, I think this has been valuable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great. And I hope that you guys got something out of listening to it. And I appreciate being able to kind of drive here. This is
nice. Fun. You had the con on this one. All right. Good to talk to you. We'll get back to you really soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.